Fair enough.
And we are live now. Hi everyone. I'm James. This is Dave. We're just going to wait a few more minutes for people to join. I think we're expecting up to 30 today. I know it's the day before bank holiday, so I know people are busy. So we'll just wait to see when that just ticks up to kind of high 20s, and I think we're going to kick off. I will orient you to kind of how this works. So format today is I'm going to hand over to Dave, who's going to run through his presentation, and we'll do that for kind of 20 minutes, and then we'll do Q&A at the end. That said, there are some sort of areas that I'll orient you to in this webinar format in case you haven't been before. We've got this chat area on the right-hand side of my screen. So I can say, I can just introduce myself here. Please do use this, introduce yourself. As we're going through on here, you can post links, you can share files, whatever you want. This is the interactive bit. So it'd be good if you guys, while we're talking, can start to interact here. We've also got this questions tab you can see in the middle, top right. Here we're going to kind of post the questions that people ask as we're going through. You can vote up and down. That'll kind of delineate the order we ask them at the end. So do ask a lot of questions. We've got plenty of time at the end for that. And on the far right, you've got the people tab. So you can kind of see who's in the chat. Some people have been good enough to put their kind of role or their trust. Others you can kind of work out from the email address. So there you go. So you can see here, hopefully you recognize a few people. You'll get a recording of this. So you don't need to take notes unless you want. Dave, is it all right if we send around the presentation as well afterwards?
No,
yeah, cool. So you'll get that as well. So we'll probably turn that into a blog, so you'll get plenty of chance to catch up with it. So yeah, that's the kind of format. I'm just going to give it another couple of minutes, just to see if we can get up to 20, and then we'll kick off. I think we've got a good mix of kind of most people here are in multi-academy trust, either CEO, COO, CFO, or on the SLT. So we'll try and keep kind of questions focused around that kind of group of people. All right, I might kick off then because I'm conscious of time. So I'm James. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Arbor. We're a management information system and data platform for schools and multi-academy trusts. We have about 1,100 schools and about 100 MATs who use Arbor across the kind of the whole, all of their schools. And we specialize in bringing that data together, all the data from all the schools together, be it attendance, behavior, progress, student, staff, pastoral, well-being data, bring it all together so trusts can identify areas of concern and intervene quicker, and also we're allowing schools to operate remotely at scale, so automating all of the little admin tasks that take valuable time away from teaching and learning, so that schools have more time to focus on teaching and learning. And we're growing by about 80% a year with a focus on MATs, and that brings us to today. So in our discussions with MATs, we come across lots of operational issues, lots of data issues, and lots of strategic issues and comms issues. So we like to kind of highlight areas of good practice, and that's what today's about, so that hopefully this is a time of rapid learning as we kind of adjust to the reality of COVID and beyond. So this is a chance to kind of reflect, shine a light on some areas of good practice, and hopefully give you some new ideas to take back into your MAT, both now and kind of as schools start to phase their return. So that's the premise for today. So on that note, I'm going to hand over to Dave to introduce himself. Maybe if you give a bit of background about the trust and how it operates, you can do that on the presentation if you want as well. Up to you.
Okay, thank you, James. Good morning, everybody. My name's Dave Noble. I'm Director of Operations for the Red Kite Learning Trust. Red Kite Learning Trust has been around since 2015. It originated from Harrogate Grammar School and 2 primary schools in Harrogate, and then in 2018, when it was 6 schools, it then doubled in size to 13 schools. Myself, I worked as a business director for the Temple Newsome Learning Partnership, which was a cooperative trust of 7 schools in East Leeds. And we'd taken some time to decide who to join with in terms of merging with an existing multi-academy trust. And we thought Red Kite Learning Trust was the best match after several bouts of speed dating and what have you, certainly in terms of vision and values and ethos. It was definitely the right mix for us to join. So I TP'd over with the schools from East Leeds and became Director of Operations for RKLT in September 2018. I've been working in school business leadership though for 12 years in the Temple Newsome Group, and originally, obviously more recently with Red Kite. Prior to that though, I worked in private sector in soft drinks and glass manufacturing in a range of operations, HR and customer service type of roles. So classic jack of all trades, master of none. So as we kind of get into a general management operations role. So without further ado, I'll share the screen on the slides.
That's great, coming through.
That's great. Okay, so yeah, when James talked to me about this a few weeks ago, I thought probably most relevant will be around how we are dealing, like probably very similar to all of you attending this morning, dealing with the same issues, the same challenges, the same pressure about coping during a pandemic. But the theme of this particularly is around how we've, as Red Kite Learning Trust, have embraced new technology and technology platforms, which already have, but really use them to help our response to the challenges that we're all facing. But just again, a little bit more background around Red Kite, 13 schools, 8 primaries, 3 secondaries, and an all-through free school in East Leeds that opened in 2015. So 8,000 children, 1,200 staff, £48 million a year. So kind of a largish multi-academy trust. I think probably the key thing on there to pick up though is the range of free school meals. So from 5% in schools in Harrogate to 76% in terms of schools in East Leeds. So truly comprehensive in terms of multi-academy trust. But again, brings real challenges in terms of being agile to respond to varying levels of need in very different settings across our trust. So this next slide, I put this really in to help with the context of what I'm going to talk about. This is a vision that we have been working on for the last 18 months. So since doubling in size in 2018, we took the view as a trust that over the last 12 and even in the next coming 12 months, it would be around consolidating and building a foundation for the trust to get shared platforms and systems and processes across all 13 schools and how we would operate. And my role as Director of Operations, as well as looking after estates and premises, catering, compliance, data protection, I also have IT in terms of strategy and vision and development for the trust. So this is a vision that we, myself and one of our head teachers, Adam Daly at Crawshaw Academy, developed some time ago. Basic challenge is that we have 13 schools with 13 separate networks, with 13 separate data centers, with 13 different internet connections. And for the last 18 months, we've started to move towards this vision of a single integrated IT network. So all 13 schools sitting within Red Kite with a single network managed by remote data centers, all within that dotted line being a single broadband structure. So we're very close to this now, and maximizing the use of key strategic partners, software as a service type of platforms to really run those key central trust business processes around MIS, which Arbor, majority of our schools, 11 of our 13 schools, are on Arbor now. A big transition happened at February half term. We've been running with PS Financials in the cloud since 2018. This summer in July, we're moving to Core HR, which is a HR and payroll system. We're in half of our schools, we run our payroll ourselves. The other half we get from Leeds City Council. So the plan here is to move everybody to the same in-house payroll system, but at the same time implement a single HR service system across all the trust. And then we have two other key areas of software as a service platforms. Compliance, Total Risk Manager, which we're implementing in September, and MyACO e-learning, which we are currently launching. Both of those packages come through our relationship with Pagabo, which is and we have a strong partnership arrangement with Pagabo. And then sitting right at the top, the key one is Microsoft 365. All our schools, bar one, are Microsoft 365 platforms. So our plan this summer was to start to move everybody onto the same 365 tenancy and really start to push the use of the tools within Microsoft, such as Teams, which you'll hear a lot of in this presentation, to really enhance communication and collaboration and sharing across the schools. It's really difficult, as many of you will probably already know, by having multiple tenancies to do that. But the key to all of that is to introduce and move to a single network. We recognise that we'd have to spend something like £1.2 million over the next 5 years in terms of upgrading, refreshing hardware, servers, switches, Wi-Fi, etc., across all our estate. So my challenge was, how could we spend that money but do something better, do something different? And the solution has been a single Dell technology infrastructure that we actually had approval for, which I'll come on to in March just gone, and the board meeting on the 26th of March, and we're in the process of having that server infrastructure delivered now and installed in 2 remote data centers, and the plan is to have that live by the beginning of July. Environ is a company who are a Dell accredited partner who are working with us to set that up, and then we'll start to migrate schools onto the new network with a single centralised IT team. So there's a lot of detail there, but it's just to give you the context of how we were moving towards this anyway, and we will have this completed by this time next year as schools all migrate onto the network. So as I say, just important to give you that context. So we were partway through the journey, and the biggest challenge for me was about how would we get user adoption on particularly aspects of Microsoft 365 that we weren't fully using across the estate, and it was difficult to use because we were on multiple tenancies. So that's that context. This is just some headlines now around how we as Red Kite Learning Trust have responded in the current challenging situation with the pandemic and the COVID-19 situation. And just some headlines from this, really. I just want to go through every single bullet point on there for you. But obviously the announcement was made on the 18th of March. We'd already been talking for several weeks leading up to this around what we would need to do, and using technology as a way of communicating and reaching out to our 13 schools was straight away there to do. And lining up a structure and a way of having management meetings at various levels within the organisation. So we started to develop that. The other thing that we identified very early on was where we had some very business critical, mission critical, if you like, processes that were going to be at risk. And one I've already referenced is around payroll, with our own in-house payroll team and our own in-house finance team, payables team. So even prior to that date, prior to that week of the 16th of March, we decided that those key mission critical staff would be self-isolating and work from home. The challenge there from an IT point of view was half of the staff who were paid from our own in-house payroll team all of that data and all of that information in those systems. A Sage system sat on a server in Harrogate Grammar School. So very quickly our IT team had to get that restructured to enable the payroll manager and his team to then work from home and access that remotely to make sure that we could run and pay our staff. So literally within a week, we got all that set up, and then at the same time got our finance team, our payables team set up in the same way so that we could carry on and pay suppliers with people working from home. So our payroll manager, for example, lives in a lovely little cottage up in Nidderdale and has been sorting the payroll out from in near Paley Bridge in North Yorkshire, and it's worked very well. Also that week we got some support for head teachers. So our centralised school improvement team who work at a trust level were allocated a number of head teachers each. And then obviously we worked into a 23rd of March where schools closed on the 20th, and we got an idea, like probably everybody else, how many pupils are going to turn up, how many children are key workers, and how many vulnerable pupils. So we started getting numbers that week, and at the same time started to implement remote learning systems where we had that. I'll come on to that in a minute. And we also at that time launched the Asda voucher scheme for free school meal pupils. So all but 2 schools were able to access that, and we got that process running ahead of the Eden Red scheme from central government. And then by the 30th of March, with the numbers we could see coming through, we decided to move to 5 hub schools, 2 in Harrogate, 2 in East Leeds, and 1 in Pudsey for Crawshaw Academy. And we safely closed, in effect, mothballed the remaining 8 schools. Had to adjust catering arrangements. In that, our in-house catering team, we had set up in the hub schools, but we also had 2 schools with a contract caterer Taylor Shaw, who proved very, very supportive and has ended up supporting our hub schools, all bar 1 hub school. Implementing premises checks for the mothballed schools, if I call it that. And we also had our very first virtual online trust board meeting that week with our trustees. So there was around 26 people, I think, all via Microsoft Teams. We used that. We operated the hub schools through Easter holidays and bank holidays, like everybody else. But the other key challenge we had was around recruitment. Making sure that our recruitment processes for September, the coming September, with a number of vacancies we'd already identified. So our HR director and her team had worked remodeling and reshaping all of those recruitment processes so that we could launch that online using Teams, using Skype to interview staff. And that was launched during the Easter holidays. The other key thing we did during Easter holidays was furlough catering staff. What was really beneficial here, and I have already said this to James, was for the first time since February half term, when the majority of our schools moved over onto Arbor, we could centrally access and see all our staff data. So during the Easter holidays, myself and one of my team were able to run all those reports and get all that critical staff information so we could get all the furlough letters ready to go. And that was a real step forward in terms of speed and ease and efficiency compared to trying to get 13 schools to gather information, put it together. So that was a real benefit to us. And then more recently, in the last couple of weeks, we started looking at nursery staff where we are dependent on private income. The thing about catering staff, I'll just go back to that, is that as a trust, we get around 1.9 million pound catering income a year. And obviously that's going to be a massive gap in our finances this year. So we put a case together. Whether we'll be supported, we'll wait and see. But that was why we ended up furloughing our catering staff, because of the loss of income. But we'd still need to employ those catering staff ourselves. We commenced on the 27th of April. We did run our first payroll remotely from David's cottage in Paley Bridge in North Yorkshire. So that was a real success. And one of those things that people, I think, just think, well, that'll just happen. But there was quite a bit of work to get that run so we could ensure that continuity. And again, it really does kind of challenge thinking around business continuity plans. Did we have one for a pandemic? I'd be honest, probably not to the detail we needed, but it's probably the same as most people. But it really did bring it to life for us, like everybody else. We also ran in the last 2 weeks parent surveys, which we'll come on to, in terms of making sure we're getting feedback. Because with all of this operational stuff, number one priority was making sure that children, our pupils, could access learning, could access resources, could get interaction from their teachers around how they were doing. And the parent surveys were key feedback for us, which I'll reference in a bit. And obviously, more recently, we're planning for reopening and getting to the new normal, which is a terrible phrase, I know, but that's what everyone's referring to. And how are we going to manage that given whatever the government announcement is on Sunday and the guidance we'll get from the department, which we are second guessing, but there's enough to work on, I think, for the time being. So in terms of how are we communicating at a distance with 13 schools? Well, really, the key message, I think, is that in the last few weeks, we've seen last 7 weeks, we've seen an exponential surge in the use of Microsoft Teams across our organisation to communicate, to share, to collaborate at all levels. We in that very first week, as I said, we set a clear structure from trust board meetings where our CEO, CFO, Richard Sheriff and Steve Howell can keep in touch with the trustees, trust core team meetings, so school improvement team, HR, finance and operations, where we would meet on a daily basis using Teams. The trust exec would meet 3 times a week, and then at an individual school level, from SLT, faculty and key stage pastoral teams, utilising to keep in touch and share information and give updates. We did allocate a COVID partner for each, that's a horrible term, sorry, but COVID-19 partner for each head teacher from our school improvement team as an extra level of support and guidance for them. In terms of the hub schools as well, we very quickly got an Eventbrite booking system in place so we could get some idea of numbers coming in, and particularly through the Easter holidays. And that's still running. And again, our expectation is we'll need to run and support those, keep those hub schools in place during the summer holidays. So at least it gives us a good idea of numbers coming in. And we've used Google Forms in terms of parent survey, and we've had 700 respond. In fact, it's probably over 900 now, but the data I'll show you on that is around the first sample of 700 we had back. So the key thing really is around MS Teams and how that has really opened up our ability to keep in touch and communicate and share. In terms of learning remotely, the key message on this slide really is, as you can see, there's no single solution. It depends on the school setting. If I went back to that IT vision, right from the outset, I said I wanted a IT infrastructure network solution that was as agnostic as possible in terms of end users at schools being able to be creative and innovative around the applications that they would want to use to support their setting for delivery of outstanding teaching and learning. And you can see from the examples I've put on there from our schools that there is a very wide range of experience that we've seen in the last 7 weeks. Harrogate Grammar School, for example, has had a very well-established one-to-one iPad scheme for the last, I think, 8 or 9 years. So very high levels of engagement and very high levels of interaction from teachers setting work, monitoring progress on Shobi, and being able to post comments and feedback back to pupils. Other schools such as Crawshaw has used Teams very much to create lessons and share lessons and get feedback, as well as using devices, platforms and applications like Sentry for interventions. Western Primary has used Zoom lessons, obviously very carefully, given some of the early feedback that was picked up, but managed in the right way by that school, and used Arbor to help email weekly timetables to parents on work that was to be done. But if we jump right down, you can see a whole range. Dojo's another one. YouTube's been used in terms of giving assemblies, a temple more. But we go to Coppice Valley and Meadowfield. Meadowfield particularly with 75% free school meals, did very, very little access to IT at home with these hard to reach families. No email addresses, can't get free school meal vouchers to parents. So we've had to put a very different solution in place at Meadowfield from teaching and learning, where home learning packs are produced, printed, and then delivered to homes with pens, paper, and all the support that they would need. Catering, for example, at Meadowfield, we actually provided hot meal service for free school meals to come in and collect as well, and send food hampers and to homes for those parents and families. So very, very different range of solutions across there. But from a learning point of view, you can see where the challenge is, and being able to have something very flexible and agile, depending on the setting. So we've very much now moved into a place where we've got well-planned and coherent online curriculums for the majority of the schools that we have there. To get out there. One of the key things that I'm being concerned around, obviously in these challenging times, has been around the social emotional support for pupils and staff. And we're currently trialing a wellbeing app in partnership with an organisation called Tranquility, which we're using in Harriet Grammar School. But we want to get some initial feedback on that and possibly roll that out across other schools as well. And the big challenge really is that, as I say, the hard to reach families and pupils, particularly vulnerable pupils. We've got 70 laptops from the DFE yet to be delivered. That's just a start. We recycled some iPads from Harrogate Grammar School as well for certain settings to help get devices to children who don't have them at home or don't have use of them. We had a year group worth, but again, that is just a start. If this is going to go on, which everybody says it will for the next probably 12 months, we need to do something different around that very quickly. So how are we doing? So as I say, that parent survey that we carried out on Google Films, and this is that first kind of batch of just over 700 responses, which is a pretty good response. I said it's over 900 now, but you can see from this that 3/4+ of parents feel that the amount of work's about right, the work that the child's been given to do is right, and the feedback they're getting from teachers is well over 3/4 of responses saying that's about right. So that's really, really encouraging feedback that we've been able to pick up, and obviously some of the comments in there in the blue again will help us interrogate and get into that feedback and understand some of those issues a bit more at a school level for those particular families. But that's really positive feedback we've had. So what's worked well, some of this I've already referenced, but positive feedback from parents, rapid adoption of Microsoft Teams. It's just incredible to see, head teachers, particularly senior leaders. What is this? What is Teams? How do we run a video call? And now it's just second nature. Everybody's engaging with it. Everybody's using it, which is fantastic to see. And again, those working from home facilities for business critical processes was really, really fantastic to see how quickly the team responded to that. The way we can absorb and disseminate information and guidance to key leaders across the trust and head teachers has been good. And keeping in touch with staff around making sure that they are, as it says here, bearing up well, which they are. Balancing working from home and family needs is a real challenge. We quickly responded to furloughing needs, but whether we will get HMRC agreement to that, I know there's differing views out there, but we took advice from our legal advisors, looked at all the guidance and believe we had a case for that. Time will tell. And as I say, the use of Arbor at trust level reporting really helped us respond very quickly, particularly to that issue. The other thing is, as business as usual has carried on to a degree from we were able at that board meeting to have board approve the £500,000 investment in that IT infrastructure, which is now all being procured and in the process of being delivered. So we've tried to continue to invest, because I think, again, as a public sector body with the available funds, we should be trying to invest where we can. Similarly, we're trying to get some estates school condition allocation investment away this summer in some schools, with building fabric projects and improvements taking place. What's not to work so well is, again, the initial challenges of having schools on different Microsoft Office tenancies was complicated to start off with. Hence the reason, again, why I'm really keen to move us onto that single tenancy, and we will be doing that this year. And it just removes a lot of that confusion around having two different email addresses. So that will all be sorted, and I think people now understand why I want to do that. The take-up at hub schools has been low, on average around 100 pupils a day across those 5, which we were surprised at. But then probably not, given some of the feedback this week around reticence of some parents about returning to school even in the coming weeks. So maybe that's an indicator that if we do get an announcement to come back and open up from sometime in June, we'll probably will be dealing with low numbers again, I'm expecting. And also the most concerning thing is low levels of attendance from vulnerable pupils and those hard to reach families, which we need to look at how we get in touch and make sure those pupils are okay. How are the changes going forward? Well, it establishes the use of Microsoft Teams as a cultural norm, really, as I've said, across the organisation, and to further impetus to develop that organisation from an IT infrastructure point of view, a pure cloud-based service, software as a service system. And then establishing multi-school groups within teams based on key stages, on faculty, curriculum groups, pastoral, behaviour, operational teams, sharing, keeping in touch, and collaborating on joint projects. I think it'll be a real step change for us as an organisation. And overall, really, the improvements, improving the efficiency and effectiveness of decision making as an organisation via a single point of data reporting, supporting team collaboration, I think will be a big difference for us moving forward. So I'm just going to finish with the best parent feedback quote we got from that 900 odd survey we carried out, which was one parent who basically said, please send gin. So maybe not going so well in that household. So with that, I'm just going to close and obviously open up to any questions or discussion. Thank you.
That's really good. So while you're closing that down, we've had quite a few questions, which we put in some of them we put in the tab. Please do ask some more in the chat area. I'll go for one that came through first from Chris, if that's all right. So this one's for you, Dave. Are you planning on any long-term changes to flexible working from home arrangements, particularly if your staff still working on payroll? And if you just click on off the screen share, then we can.
Yeah, sorry.
Office. I can see myself. It's like a screen inception. There you go. So are you planning on any long-term changes to flexible working from home arrangements, particularly if your staff working on payroll and finance processes, which you said, in their cottages?
Yeah, I think it really does open up that possibility. Interesting talking to colleagues though. They really do miss that social interaction as well, of being in work and seeing people face to face. So I think it's a balance, but what it will enable is much more flexible working. And I think as a culture, as an organisation, to allow that to happen and have trust basically in people to be able to do that where applicable. And I don't see any reason why not. We're much more agile as an organisation to do that. I wouldn't say we've got any defined documented plans we're going to do that, but I think as a culture shift in the organisation, absolutely no reason why not. For certain key roles we could do that.
Do you think that plays through to teaching and learning staff as well? Because you've got now you have everyone's online, right? You have the ability to remote mark, potentially remote feedback. Has that kind of entered your thinking at all into when schools do partially go back, and as you said, lots of families will keep their kids back as well. Like how it's going to be a blended, you're going to have like some in, some out. So have you thought about how that impacts like the majority of your like teaching and learning?
I think the answer to that, James, is that we'd already thought of that, given the type of the way some of the schools were working, and again, particularly Harrogate Grammar School, that capacity and those tools were already there. I think what's happened now is that a lot more people understand how that can be used and have started to use it. So it's just encouraging that and keeping. I think school leadership teams making sure that they're getting regular information on the take up, and particularly, I think for me, it's around children who aren't engaging in that process. Why aren't they engaging in that? Are we looking into that? Are we reaching out to those families and making sure they're okay and they need any help with that? I think it's really refining those processes and getting that information and making sure that they are. So I think we can get better with that. Absolutely, there's no doubt, but it just needs much more of a management focus on how we're using that information and responding to it.
Cool. And there's Jane and Grace were kind of talking about online training. You've had to roll out tools across the entire map without seeing anyone.
Yes.
How does that make you reflect about how you train staff, and how will that again change how you train staff like when you start to go back?
So again, very similar to the last answer, I think this we'd had a number of different vehicles for online training and e-learning, but this year we were launching Mayako, and it's just enabled us to really push that now. So as a vehicle and a way in which we can ensure staff are engaging with the most recent information, the most recent advice, and make sure that they're aware of trust policies, it absolutely has been a major difference. And I think that is really, again, going to help leaders within the organization understand what these tools are for and how they can be used. Again, we're monitoring take-up of that, we're monitoring the engagement to staff, and we'll review feedback from staff on the courses and the ease of access to it. But so far, it's been really positive.
I mean, we'll certainly see that with some of the schools we're implementing in. Like, everyone's quite nervous about training and like, well, it's not going to work as well as face-to-face. But in some ways, people have more time. In some ways, they're kind of forced to get to grips with it, and they're getting really good practice. So it's kind of interesting to see what good practice will be in terms of staff training when we get back to something approaching normal. So that's a good one. What about communication? So you talked about one of your concerns, or what hasn't gone so well, is like low attendance of vulnerable students. So how are you communicating like with your parents and guardians at scale, and how do you change that for those vulnerable students? Like, what's working well and what's not?
I think that's a key point that's coming out of this, James. I mean, we've like everybody, a lot of people listening to this now will know where you have those hard to reach families. I'll use that term again. And it's always been the challenge about communicating, keeping in touch. Why isn't the child at school? What is going on? How do we get that support there for them? And this is just so much more exacerbated in the current situation because you're just not getting that physical contact. So, and particularly again, the profile of families in those desperate situations is they don't have internet access, they don't have email addresses, they don't, so at some point I think it literally has to be some way of getting out there and seeing what's going on with them, and that's the challenge, I think, and that's where we'll get to. We've got to get to that pretty quickly, actually. But whether it's around we have a pretty good setup in East Leeds with extended services. It's a legacy from local authority days, but we've kept that team on. So where they are in touch with social services, whether it's the police or whoever, we've got to get those links, those cross multidiscipline team approaches to make sure that we're getting the latest information and keeping in touch with those families as best as possible. It's incredibly hard in the current situation.
One question from Jacob as well. So this is starting to come through as you mentioned that the trust is moving from kind of establishing a baseline of like looking after people, communicating, setting just enough work, to now like setting the right work and quality of work. So Jacob's question is kind of, how are you managing your teaching staff and the expectations on quality and format of your digital content, your digital teaching?
So that for me is down to head teacher and SLT at local and our school improvement team at trust level, starting with our CEO Richard, Sheriff, and the school improvement teams, working with the head teachers to make sure that the right processes are in place. Again, it comes down to management information, doesn't it? It comes down to what lessons are being set, what responses are we getting, what engagement are we getting from students, and the challenge is to make sure that local school leadership teams have got that data and are gathering that data and then reviewing it and making sure that it's happening across particularly those critical year groups, year 10 and year 12 particularly at the moment at secondary level. Has got to be that engagement's got to be there. So again, I haven't got any raw data to be able to share and talk about in terms of that yet, but I know we are working that at a trust level with local school leadership teams to making sure that that engagement is happening. So teachers are getting feedback from students and are giving feedback to students on the work that they're setting. That's the only way.
Yeah,
in my book.
Yeah. And you're going to have multiple feelers from that because you're using multiple systems. So like, what's your learning management system saying? Are there lessons happening when they're timetabled? What's your response to your surveys? Like, it's going to be triangulating through a few different senses, I think. One last question then from Andy, and then I think I'll hand it to Becca. So how much did the pandemic drive adoption of your vision and buy-in? And do you think that's going to continue post-lockdown?
Say that again. Sorry, I didn't quite get the beginning.
Is it coming up on your screen? So it's how much? So has COVID basically? How much has COVID driven adoption? And do you think it's going to carry through? Like, so when we come out of lockdown, do you think adoption is going to drop off?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Andy. It certainly has helped in terms of. I don't mean to sound flippant with that, but it certainly has. I think helped people understand. So what's Dave been banging on about for the last 12, 18 months with this IT vision? I think people go, oh, right, I get it now. So I think it says how we as a trust and an organisation make sure that we're putting these structures in place. We have learning groups across schools at the moment, but they would get in a car, they'd meet once a term, face to face, and it's a bit clunky, and it was good to have a chat, but did it lead to anything? I think what we do with this is to really, and by connecting them up through a single Microsoft 365 tenancy with a single team structure, is you're going to just drive so much more interaction and chat. And I think the thing here is if people see there's a benefit from doing that, if a geography teacher at Temple Moor knows a geography teacher at Harrogate Grammar School and can connect much easier and start to show, you talked about that lesson plan, what have you been doing with, it just starts to drive that collaboration so much more. So my hope is, because you've got to make it beneficial for people to engage in this stuff and get some wider networks across the organisation. And I think when people have seen how this can work, it's our responsibility to really promote it, but make it beneficial, and people will use it.
I agree. I think when we think about that as well, we're talking about like how the school community can be brought closer together, ironically. And then this is kind of post-lockdown because you've got the tools to enable. I like your kind of working group example. So subject leads can get together virtually much quicker and easier. So maybe the quality of interaction isn't as good when they're face to face, but the quantity can be higher. So that has its own quality. So yeah, I think that's something we're thinking.
I think
as
it's
well.
that whole thing, isn't it? I can't remember. Is it 21 or 28 times? It's somebody does something 21 times, it just becomes natural. We've more than done this 21 times now. So I'm hoping that people will start to engage. It's making that connections across schools now, which is the next step we need to do.
I think that'll show the power of all of your, like, when a staff member can look up another staff member and start to chat with them. That's kind of very powerful. Okay, cool. I think that's about all we have time for. Thank you, Dave. That was great. So Becca, I know you're going to pop back on stage and mention kind of some of the next set of talks we've got coming up as well.
Yes, thank you so much. My screen and just show you just a couple of quick slides of what's coming up next. Perfect. So next week, we have another MAP webinar with Jonathan Bishop, who's CEO of Cornerstone Academy Trust, who's talking about online education and how we can make this really successful. So do join that if you're free next Friday. I will send you a sign up link in an email after this. So just sign up from there or get in touch if you don't receive that email with James's email below, james@arbor-education.com. And something else that's really exciting we wanted to share with you for the first time is we've created a new report for every trust that has 2 or more schools. And this is a fantastic report that we've used 3 different data sources with all of your schools to compare your trust against other trusts in England for measures such as your size, phases and growth. And also you can see how your schools are performing against each other with performance measures and look at how they're comparing against the national average for the key headline measures. So it's a really clear and easy to read report that you can share with stakeholders, and it'll be useful going back hopefully to look at how you can prepare your curriculum and teaching and learning for, I guess, the next few months with partial school opening. And get in touch if you'd like to join the waiting list for this to know when your trust specific personalised report is ready. So again, use this email address below, and we've got a sign up link in your email you'll receive after this.
Great. I look forward to hearing from some of you either with the report, which I'm very excited about, or next Friday as well. So have a great bank holiday weekend. It's going to be a scorcher. I look forward to the announcement on Sunday as well. We'll be on tenterhooks. So yeah, catch you next week. It'll be a brave new world. Take care.
Thank you.
See you guys. Thanks, Dave.
Thanks. Bye.